After a season of tanking and only ending up with 25 wins on the season, the draft lottery does not go the way of the Toronto Raptors, and they leave this disastrous season empty-handed. And even though people are trying to spin pros on this situation, we have to consider this mini era as a complete failure for the franchise. Let's get into it. And I'm not going to go back on my points I said previously about the draft lottery, where I said I'll be happy if we keep the pick, of course, but I'll be disappointed if we end up losing it. And here I am sitting after the draft lottery, extremely disappointed with the result, where the Raptors fall to 8th in the draft lottery, and therefore the pick that was traded away conveys to the San Antonio Spurs. I'm not going to retract any of my stances prior to the lottery on how the Raptors handled their season here. There were a ton of mistakes that led up to the decision to tank on this season, which we'll discuss over the course of this video. But at the point of the decision to tank, considering everything in the past as a sunk cost, the Raptors ultimately made the right call in tanking. They masterfully tanked their way to only 25 wins. They tanked even better than they did in the Tampa season, where they ended up with the 7th worst record in the NBA. They actually had more wins in that COVID-shortened season than they did in this season. But, sitting through as a huge fan of the Toronto Raptors, sitting through a season with only 25 wins that had a tank that didn't really give us a lot of on-court product to be happy about, it's extremely disappointing sitting here today looking back on what can be classified in many ways as a wasted season. And I'll reveal why over the course of the video. But before we do that, I want to remind you this is Amateur Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors content right here on YouTube. I do videos, I do live streams, all covering this team. So if you like the Raptors, you're going to love this channel. Get subscribed today. Help us on the road to 18,000 subs. If you enjoyed this one along the way, make sure you do hit that like button. So ultimately, tanking was the right call by the Raptors. They decided that giving themselves a 45.8% chance of keeping their pick in the draft was a higher percentage than the percentage chance they had of making the playoffs. And based on the on-court product, I would concur with that thought process overall, and I think you would as well. But it is disappointing that this entire situation led up to a wasted season in many ways. Look, absolutely, there were some pros associated with this season. Look, you got some good on-court development reps. We got to see Scotty Barnes as the lead option on the team. Got to see what that looked like. Some more reps went the way of Grady Dick near the end of the season, which would certainly help his production and certainly help his development going forward. Like, there were some pros associated with the season, but if we look back on the last 2 years for the franchise, they've really set themselves back. Like, we look back 2 years ago, the team started with... This team was coming off 48 wins, a 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. They had Fred VanVleet coming off of an all-star season. Pascal Siakam would go on to be an all-star in that season. He has 2 all-star appearances, 2 all-NBA appearances. We had Scotty Barnes coming off of a Rookie of the Year season. We had 2 years left on OG Anunoby's contract, which was one of the very best contracts in the NBA. That was a really good team. It had a guy who'd won Coach of the Year not too long ago in Nick Nurse. And it's kind of crazy to look back that just 2 years ago, that was the situation for the Raptors. And they've crumbled to this point where they can have a masterclass in tanking and come up empty-handed with their pick. And ultimately what it came down to was that 48-win season, kind of looking back, seems like the outlier for the Raptors. That was the weird bump for Toronto, whereas okay, we had come off of this amazing era. We had the down year in Tampa, then had that really good year right after the tank season in Tampa, finishing with 48 wins, losing the first round of the playoffs to the Philadelphia 76ers. And it seems, looking back, like that was the outlier season, and the last 2 seasons have been more in tune with what this core actually was. And perhaps over the course of that season where the Raptors didn't exactly play their best basketball throughout the season. They are coming off a 48-win season. There was the weight of expectations as to what that team could achieve in the 2022-2023 season, and they fell well short. They struggled with the NBA adapting to their strategy of having length and size in every position. They tremendously struggled without a center. And even though that was addressed at the trade deadline in acquiring Jakob Poeltl, that trade should not have come at the expense at the 2023 trade deadline of a future first-round pick. There was a growing concern amongst the fan base that this core was not going to be progressing going forward to get to the heights that we want to reach. It'd be better to have a little bit of a reset, better to have a little bit of a refresh. But instead, the front office doubled down on the core by trading away this 2024 first-round pick with only a top 6 protection rather than a top 10 protection on it to acquire Jakob Poeltl. In a vacuum, I've said that trade was fine. A first, 2 seconds, salary dump for Jakob Poeltl. That kind of made sense, but assessing the team's situation at the time, that team really did not justify getting that additional investment of that level. Yes, we needed a center, but we should not have put away a future first-round pick in order to make that trade happen. That was the mistake. And like I said, that was kind of doubling down on the core. Then they kind of tripled down on the core, seemingly, in this most recent offseason, in the offseason of 2023. You're signing a guy like Dennis Schroeder, not being able to replace Fred VanVleet, and things have really spiraled out of control here. So it is nice to see that over the course of the season, they have made up a little bit for the mishaps of the past. The OG Anunoby trade that brought Emmanuel quickly and RJ Barrett to the team was fantastic. That was an excellent trade. That may go down in a few years' time as one of the best trades that has happened in the Masai Ujiri era. And I'm not saying that these are like, A-tier star players here, but, to get out of that bad situation, bail yourself out of the contract situation with OG Anunoby, potentially leaving the team for free in the offseason. That was a good move. The Pascal Siakam trade wasn't the best. Made up a little bit by trading away what became the 29th overall pick for Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk. That looks like a pretty good move as well. So in the time that they have assessed that this core is not the right core to be building with going forward and changing strategies, changing direction, in that time, good decisions have been made. But over the course of the season, like those trades could have happened regardless. Those trades could have happened even a year prior, and we would have had a head start on this. Those trades could have happened a year prior. We wouldn't be sitting here losing a first-round pick to the San Antonio Spurs in a season in which the Raptors tanked. So as much as we got some good out of the season for sure, with the trades that went down, with the rebuilding of assets that went down, yes, that's fine, but sitting here at the end of the season, those trades could have happened regardless. We could have made these roster moves regardless of the season going the way it did, but that didn't happen. We could have made these moves at the 2023 trade deadline instead of the 2024 trade deadline, and we'd be in a lot better of a position now than we are today. So that's why I'm more than disappointed on the current situation. Disappointed with the draft lottery, even more disappointed in thinking of how much better of a position this team could be in if these decisions were made when they should have been made at the 2023 trade deadline instead of delaying and stalling and ultimately setting the team up in a worse spot. But as it stands, the Raptors, we are in a good position here, I think. We're in a decent spot here. Look, the outlook on the franchise could be better, but again, people saying that there are some pros in the situation. Yes, there are some pros. I think a lot of it's kind of coping, but the pros of this situation are it's over. The pick conveys we are in charge of our own destiny as far as it comes to future draft picks for this organization. That's good to have. We should have just had control anyways, but that's good to have. And what's the one thing that this franchise has just done very well in the Masai Ujiri era? It's drafting talent. It's finding talent in the drafts. It's a shame that 2 of the last 3 or 4 years we've given away our first round pick both times to the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, they're probably laughing here. They got I think it was a 21st overall pick from the Raptors for Thaddeus Young. They got an 8th overall pick from the Raptors for Jakob Poeltl. They're laughing at what they got out of the Raptors in the last few years in these trades here. So for me, I think it's great the Raptors have now control of their own assets going forward, which means they've unlocked the ability to make trades with those assets. They can now trade their 2025 pick, their 2026 pick, their 2027 pick, and all the picks down the line. They can now trade these ones away. Yes, that's all fine. That's all good to have. But what does scare me a little bit is that, like I said, what the team does best is draft players, find talent in the draft. So it does scare me that now Masai Ujiri has the ability to go and trade these, which I very much hope he doesn't. And I hope there is just working with this core and supplementing the talent of this core with the upcoming draft classes. So we're in a tricky spot, but the way to make it better is just patience. Allow this core some time to develop. Financially, it's going to be a bit more difficult. RJ's already on his big contract. Emmanuel Quickly's about to be on a big contract. Scotty Barnes is a year away from signing his extension, which is very likely going to be, he's signing an extension right now, but that money kicks in next year. That's very likely going to be a rookie max. So start to supplement these guys with the cheap rookie contracts. Try to strike some gold in the draft because, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but to think that this Raptors team is going to bounce back from a 25-win season and be up near contending levels, this is not going to happen. I think the reality is likely the Raptors are going to have a 8 to 14 pick in the next draft, where they will be able to lock in their selection. And perhaps, 8 to 14 in the next draft might be better than a top 6 pick in this current draft. Who knows? I myself would rather just roll the dice on this year's draft, knowing that that's going to be a top 6 pick, but it's going to be difficult for this team to make the playoffs next year. I think that the most you can realistically expect is a play-in tournament berth where, hey, maybe you do sneak into the playoffs from that point on. But to think that this team is just going to burst out the gate and be a top 6 team next year, I just don't really see that happening. So times are going to be tough for the Raptors here. But ever since the decision was made to give up on that previous core, start a new era here for the Raptors, a lot of good decisions have been made by the front office in rebuilding the fan base's trust and my trust in their ability to run this franchise going forward. So the future is not as bright as it should be sitting here in the offseason of 2024, but there is still reason for optimism. It's now time to put the pieces back into place and repair the mistakes of the years past to get this team on the right direction to once again be a contender one day in the NBA in the near future. So what do you make of this whole situation? Give me your thoughts and opinions on this video in the comments down below. That'll do it for me for today. Thanks so much for watching this video. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for more Raptors content, and I'll see you again next time for another video.